With the help of Hashem, we are learning Sukah, Daf, Nun, Dalid. We are entering the final three dafim of Masechta Sukah. We left off on Daf Nun Gimel, Amid Bey's second to last line in the Amid. We are finishing up the discussion, the machloikis between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim. Rabbi Yehuda, as we learned, holds that the soundings of the trumpets, Tkiya, Teruah, Tekiya, is considered achas. It's considered one single mitzvah versus the Chachamim who consider these three soundings, Tkiya, Teruah, Tekiya, as three separate mitzvahs. And we're going to link it with a certain statement that was said by Rav Kahana that is actually very negeya. Lamaisa, when we compare in halacha the blowing of the shofar now to the blowing of the trumpets in the Beis HaMikdash, as we'll speak out in a moment, whether we breathe in between the shvarim and the teruah, or we dafka take a pause, but we may not or we do not breathe, and we're going to share the minhag Chabad as it's written in Shulchan Aruch, as it's written in our luach. Now we're going to learn on Daf Nun Dalid, as we learned in the Mishnah, that the trumpets are blown in the Beis HaMikdash in conjunction with the karbanos, and the details are 9 soundings were made. Our Mishnah views Tkiya, one, Teruah, another one, Tkiya, another one. In other words, there were 3 sets of 3 during the Karban Tamid, during the Tamid Shel Bein Harbayim, and during Musaf. Basically, like we learned yesterday, that whenever a shiur, whenever a music was sung by the Levium, they would take an interval, and there were 3 intervals. And in every hefsek, the trumpets were sounded. Comes along the Amoyre Rav Acha Bar Chanina, and he says that during the days that more than one musaf was brought, Shabbos, Yom Tiv, 2 musafin are brought, or if you're going to have, let's say, Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos, Rosh Hashanah, 3 musafin are brought. During every musaf carbon, there was a full set of these 9 soundings. Now all of that is going to have to fit with that which we learned in the Mishnah, that every day there was always at least 21 soundings, and there was never more than 48, and we're going to see whether never more than 48 will fit with this shita of Rav Acha Bar Rab Chanina. Because of this, we will also be learning whether the Beis Din, and during the times that we established the calendar in the ideal way through the testimony of witnesses, whether they delayed Elul, they lengthened Elul, to make sure that Yom Kippur does not fall out on Sunday. And as we will see, this is really subject to our machloikas Tanoim. The challenge of Yom Kippur falling out on Sunday is Yerkaya and Meisaya. Yerkaya means that if people want to eat vegetables Motzoi Yom Kippur, being that we're not allowed to cut Shabbos, nor on Yom Kippur, we can't harvest them. They had no refrigeration then. So basically, vegetables would wither if you have to prepare it more than 48 hours prior to eating it. And Messiah is that we may not bury someone who passed away on Shabbos. We may not bury someone on Yom Kippur. If they're going to be juxtaposed one to the other, Shabbos and then Sunday, Yom Kippur, then it's going to be covered hameis. It's going to go by at least 48 hours, or around them. It could go by 48 hours without someone being buried. And so we're going to speak a little bit about the establishment of the calendar. We're going to speak about the importance for us to do things in the Beis HaMikdash, to make a hekeda, for us to make a public indication that today is Rosh Chodesh, because when it came to the days of Rosh Chodesh, people had a doubt. Maybe it's Rosh Chodesh, maybe it's not. So there was more than one heker that was done to publicize what day that today is Rosh Chodesh, and a lot more. Again, let's start on Daf Nun Gimel Amid Beis. Kaman Ozla, towards the middle, towards the end of the second to last line, after recording the machloikas. In our Mishnah, the way the Mishnah words the minimum soundings of the trumpets, the maximum sounding of the trumpets is 2148. That's predicated on counting every sound as a sound for itself, as a mitzvah for itself. Tkiya is counted as 1, Teruah is counted as 2, the final Tkiya is counted as 3. The Tanach Rabbi Yehuda, who words the same by saying never less than 7, never more than 16. It's the same numbers, because it's 7 times 3. It's 16 times 3, because Rabbi Yehuda considers all of these 3 soundings one set as one mitzvah. So Kaman Azlaha the Amar Rav Kahana. and these are very important words about the Beis Hamikdash, that ein bein tkiya litrua v'loy klum, that one may not make any interruption between the tkiya and the trua. Now, Chavre, look inside the last Rashi in the Amid, v'loy klum, loy hoya mafsik bein tayim, ela kidei neshima, no interruption. Doesn't mamish mean no interruption? Rashi says no interruption is there was nothing more than kedei neshima. Now, you can understand the word kedei neshima, the time that it takes to take a breath, but we're going to follow most to understand that Rashi is actually saying is that one should take a breath. In other words, even though you cannot make interruptions, but there are different sounds. And if you're not even going to take a breath in between the tki and the teruah, it's going to make it one continue. It's going to make it halachically be considered one contiguous, one straight sound, which is not good. So no interruption, but yes, take a breath, and let's keep that in mind. And let's first go back to the Gemara. So who does this follow? Says the Gemara, this must follow Rabbi Yehuda. In other words, since Rabbi Yehuda considers these three sounds one single mitzvah, that's why there has to be an emphasis not to make a real hefsek. A breath is not a hefsek here, but not to make a real hefsek. If we were to follow the Chachamim, if we were to follow the Shita of our Mishnah, that we view every sound as a mitzvah for itself, then why would you not be allowed to make an interruption? So says the Gemara, pshita, isn't that a given? Says the Gemara, no, that's not so pshita. It's correct, but it's not a pshita. Daf nun dalid, because mahu the tema, one might have thought that Rav Kahana really follows the Shita of the Rabbanan, that hold that every sound is considered a separate mitzvah. And what does Rav Kahana mean when he says that ein bein tkiya l'trua v'loy klum la'afuke mid Rabbi Yechanan? We have a machlokes amoyroyim. We have a machlokes between Rabbi Abbo and Rabbi Yechanan regarding Rabbi Yechanan says that if a person blew a tkiya and they made a huge interruption. What does a huge interruption mean? Is that the pause, the break in between one sound in a set and the other was sufficiently long, the break was sufficiently long for one to be able to blow that entire set in the interval. Rabbi Bo says that's already considered the hefsek. You don't have to make it, just to take a breath. You can take a longer interval, but you can't make a hefsek which is so long that you would be able to finish the whole set in that interval. That's Rabbi Bo. Rabbi Yechanan has no limit. Rabbi Yechanan says that Shama Teisha Tkiyos, and every sounding was 1 hour away from the other. B'teisha shos bayoim. Rabbi Yechanan says that you're good. One might have thought that Rav Kahana's statement, ein bein tkiya l'teruah, is simply to say that we don't paskin like Rabbi Yechanan, but we still paskin like Rabbi Bo. In other words, that you have to make sure that the break should not be that long that you can finish the whole set in the break. But if the break is not that long, then say that, you can break for a couple of seconds in between each sound and the other. Maybe that would be the pshat in Rav Kahana. That's the komash, but no. That he's following Rabbi Yehuda. And since it's considered one mitzvah, that's what Danny asked yesterday, like what's the nafkamina and halacha? If it's one mitzvah, we don't even tolerate the sheet of Rabbi Bo. In other words, other than you being allowed to take one breath, pashut to be mafsik between the tkiya and the trua sound, other than that, you have to keep on going. That's the chiddush, that he follows Rabbi Yehuda. Now the question is, how do you know that Rav Kahana follows the Tana Rabbi Yehuda? Maybe Rav Kahana, Taka follows the Rabbanan. It's considered three separate mitzvahs. You don't have to mamish juxtapose one sounding with the other by only taking one breath in between. And by the way, other Rishonim hold, even in Rashi, that it's only, you can't even take a breath. You just have to pause bizman that it takes kedei neshima. Maybe he follows the Rabbanan. So the Gemara says, no. Because Rav Kahana didn't say ein bein tkiya l'trua. He said v'loy klum. The v'loy klum means nothing and nothing. Garnish mishnisht. Not even like Rabbi Bo. Not even like Rabbi Bo. You don't even tolerate a smaller hefsek. That must be that he follows Rabbi Yehuda. Now, like I mentioned, this is all the way in Shulchan Aruch, when we do learn certain dinim of the soundings of the shofar today, with how the trumpets, not the shofar, how the trumpets were blown in the Beis Hamikdash. And the big question is Koren kol, between tkiya, between the soundings today, whether it is tashrat, tashat, tarat, do you have to take a breath in between? And more, the ikir question here is when it comes to the shvarim teruah, really, we all know that in the Torah it's tkiya, teruah, tkiya. Why do we have a shvarim? Is because there is a debate what the teruah is. So to cover all the bases, as we say, it might be shvarim, it might be teruah, it might be both together. But the shvarim teruah is all under the name of teruah. So maybe you have to take a breath between the tkiya and the shvarim teruah, but in between the shvarim and the teruah, you may not even take a breath. To make sure that there is mamish no hefsek, because it's not even between two soundings, it's one sound itself. You're being mafsik one sound itself. And indeed, what we follow is, being that we have a machlokes about it. Now, you have certain Rishonim who understand that if you may not take a breath, it's ma'akev b'di'evet. We follow the Rabbeinu Tam that holds that this whole question is only lachatchila. And therefore, what we end up doing is by the tkiyas that we call the tkiyas miyushav, which is the first 30 soundings when the people may be sitting, unlike when people are standing Shemona Esrei. Over there, we dafke don't take a breath. Our minig is that tkiya, shvarim. Now we make a pause. There's always going to be a pause, but we dafke don't breathe in between the shvarim and the teruah. To follow those Rishonim who say that you may not even take a breath, that a breath is considered a hafsaka. And then, when it comes to the final soundings, which is done during the Shemona Esrei, and afterwards, what we call the Tkiyas Mu'umad, there, we dafke take a breath. And for people who know how to blow shofar, it's not very easy. You don't have to take the shofar away from your mouth. You can take a breath through your nose. But that's the topic. The whole question is connected to our sugya over here, and the Rashi, and the other Rishonim, Gavaldik. Okay. Chevra Daf Nun Daled, now 4 lines from the top of the Amid. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam sha'akol nehei v'dvarim. Says the Gemara, referring back to the Mishnah. When the Mishnah is giving us the case where they would make the most soundings of the trumpets, and the most was 48. And when was that, says the Mishnah? It was when Erev Shabbos falls out during Sukkot. Okay, so says the Gemara, if you will put together the Mishnah and Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis, and the Mishnah and Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis actually gives us 12 soundings of the trumpets. But whenever we say 12, guys, in our Mishnah, we're counting Tkiya as 1, Teruah as 2, the next Tkiya as 3. So the Mishnah counts a total of 12 soundings for the procession of the going to get the water, of the returning with the water. Pashut, if you would look at Daf Nun Aleph Amud Beis, in the Mishnah that goes through the soundings that is done during the procession, there are 3 soundings that are mentioned on Daf Nun Aleph that are not mentioned over here. Gavaldik. Ve'ilu l'mayla asiris loiktani. There was a sounding that the Mishnah said on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Beis, and again we had yesterday the 10th step. Is it the 10th milmayla lamata? Is it the 10th milmata lamayla? Doesn't matter. Somewhere, when they're going down the 15 steps, either they only went down 5 or they went down 10, the Mishnah Daf Nun Aleph Amud Beis says that the trumpets were sounded. Always 3. Tkiya, Teruah, Tkiya. When the Mishnah Daf Nun Gimel is going through the 48, it omits those soundings. So says the Gemara, you're right, Anachanami. Yeah, that our Mishnah is following the Tana of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. And the Mishnah Daf Nun Aleph Amud Beis is not Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. The Tanya. When it comes, this Braisa is expounding on the Mishnah Daf Nun Aleph. Shalosh Lamaila Asiris. 3 was on the 10th step. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Oimer, he takes out those 3, but he puts in another 3. In other words, all of the Tanoim have the same Mesorah, that during the ceremony that's uniquely connected to Sukkos, whether it is all about the drawing of the water, or whether it's regarding the mitzvah that we learned as a halacha l'Moshe Misinai of placing the aravis around the mizbeach, and we also learned above that when they place the aravis around the mizbeach, shalosh al gabi hamizbeach. So it's either one or the other. Beautiful. Everyone knows there were 12 soundings of the trumpets connected to Sukkahs. Are all 12 concerning the drawing of the water? Well, or are they connected 9 to the drawing of the water and the final 3 connected to the Arava? That's the Machlokes. And Ha'omer L'mayla Asiris, which is the Mishnah Daf Nun Aleph, Einoi Oimer Al Gabe HaMizbeach. Yeah, of course, the Aravas were leaned around the Mizbeach. No one is debating that. But there was no soundings of the trumpets connected with it. And therefore the bottom line will be is no matter what shita you follow, there will not be more than 48. Because to come to number 48, you have to include the 12 that are connected to Sukkahs. Seder. Elama, yeah, you're right. Our Mishnah doesn't mention the 10th step because it already has the 3 on the side of the Mizbeach. Okay. And the my time that Eliezer ben Yaakov says the Gemara, Kiven the Takal Psicha Sha'arim, since the beginning of the day started with the sounding of the trumpets, so Lamaila Asiris Lamali the Taka. In other words, it's more connected when you go through a doorway. And by the way, that's consistent. The only one that's the anomaly is when he's in the middle of going down the stairs. It's not connected to a shar. So hay lav sharhu. So therefore, it's not blown there. We know that there were 12 soundings altogether. Yeah, there was one connected with Aravis. Hilka chagab mizbeach adif. And the Rabbanan hold, no, kiven the taka lemilui hamayim. First of all, the soundings were made in connection to drawing the water. So you would make it when he comes to this point in his procession, which is when they reach the 10th step. So you already have 12. Once you have 12, can't be that it's there. In other words, are we connecting? He would rather connect all of the soundings than Negeya to the procession of the drawing of the water. It doesn't have to be dafke when you go through a gate. Okay. Oh, there's so much to say on this. B'chlal and davening. In other words, there are certain points. What was the purpose of the sounding of the trumpets? Even during davening, there's certain places where we take a break. There are parts of davening, for example, Kaddish. The whole concept of Kaddish is to go up to a higher level. And later, when we added other parts of the Tefilla, but we didn't want to add a Kaddish, today we say Ana B'koyach. In other words, there are certain points where a pause needs to be taken. Gavaldik. So going through a gate is certainly a place where a pause needed to be taken and trumpets needed to be blown. But in middle of going down steps, that's the machlokes, whether that is more important than putting that others around the Mizbeach or not. Okay. Now, he came to Bavel, and he came from the south. So I saw Masnisa Biyadeh, he brought a Braisa that prior to him no one knew in his Chevra. And what is the Braisa? He quoted the pasuk from Parshas Baha Aloischa, where the Torah mentions Ubnei Aharon HaKohanim Yisku'u B'Chatzotzros, and the word Yisku'u is completely extra. The word shall blow. Why? Because Shekfar Nemar, interestingly, this is typical. Shekfar Nemar doesn't mean before. Here, Shekfar Nemar means a little bit later. A few psukim later, it says that Utokatam B'Chatzotzros al Oiloisechem ve'al Zivchei Shalmechem. So since it's clear that the trumpets are sounded while a carbon is brought, and the details are that when a carbon is brought with the Leviim singing their shiur, during the singing of the shiur, there was a total of 3 sets or a total of 9 sounds. So since we know that the blowing of the Kohanim is connected to the carbon, so it could have said all the Torah doesn't write in the pasuk Uskatam B'Chatzotzros is who does the sounding of the trumpets. So the pasuk prior should have said Zubnei Aharon HaKohanim B'Chatzotzros. It would have been enough. We would have understood it's about sounding. So what does the word Yisku'u come to teach us? So here are the words in the Braisa. That's a little bit enigmatic, and the words are Hakoil Lefi Hamusafin Toikin. That we blow according to the Musav offerings. What does it mean we blow according to the Musav offerings? So Rab Acha, who brought this Braisa, right away explained it. So who Tani Lavu, who Amarla, it means Shetoiken al Kol Musav Musav. Just like we had in our Mishnah, by the Talmud in the morning, by the Talmud in the afternoon, by whenever the Leviim would sing shiur, they would blow a total of 9 sounds, or a total of 3 sets. And by the way, the Mishnah said the same thing as with Musaf. But what people did not know is what happens if there is a day where more than one carbon Musaf is brought. So he brings a Tana, he brings a Braisa that says that I don't care if they're going to bring 2 Musafin or if they're going to bring 3 Musafin. For every Musaf, there is a standalone set of soundings, which is a total of 9. And now, based on this Braisa, I mean, most of the daf right now will be, hold on, Oy Bazoi, we're going to try to find cases where you will have more than the 48 sounds. The Mishnah says never more than 48, if indeed, whenever there's a day in which there's more than one Musaf, every Musaf has its own 9 additional sounds. Frek the Gemara Tanan, it says in our Mishnah, Erev Shabbos, that's Shabbatay Chachag, Erev Shabbos, that's inside, right, on Sukahs, Hoyesham Memches, the Emisa, if Rav Acha is right, Litni Shabbos Shabbatoich Hachag. Any Shabbos. Shabbos. Don't forget, guys, Shabbos is Musaf. I'll make the cheshbon in a moment. Shabbos, Sukkos, you will have Chamshin V'chad. You're going to have 51. Now, guys, true, before we come back, that they didn't draw the water, but let's go now with the Havamina. You have 21 was every day. That's how the Mishnah began. So 21 everyday minimum was also on Shabbos. Now, you have 9 for the Musaf of Shabbos. You have 9 for the Musaf of Yom Tov, of Cholamoid. We have a Musaf on Cholamoid Sukkos. So that's another 18, plus the 12 connected to the drawing of the water. So 21 and 18 and 12 is 51. So answers the Gemara, Amar Rab Zeira, no, it won't be 51. Because from the everydays, 21s, the first one the Mishnah mentioned is when they opened up the gates in the morning. Amar Rab Zeira lefi she'ein toikin lepsicha she'arim b'Shabbos. So you're losing those 3. So you're back, it's a wash. So it's also 48, but it's not more than the ones that the Mishnah mentioned. And one second, why not? So we did learn this a few days ago. First of all, there's a general rabbinic prohibition of sounding a musical instrument on Shabbos and on Yom Tov. On the other hand, we learned, number 1, Ein Shvus B'Mikdash. So the question is, how essential are the soundings of the trumpets together with that mitzvah? So when it comes to sounding the trumpets with the carbon tamar shel shachar, they would blow it on the Beis HaMikdash. Right? We learned that above. But like Rashi writes at the end of the narrow lines, that when it comes to the opening of the gates in the morning, I'm reading Rashi, she'eino le-mitzvah kit kiyah shel carbon. When it comes to blowing the trumpets, when a carbon is brought, the Torah says, "Usekatam b'chatzotzotz al oiloi sechem." We just had this pasuk. The blowing of the trumpets in the morning, says Rashi, "Aval hanach l'simana ninu." It's more as a sign. We just had this at the end of the daf yesterday. There's a mitzvah, and then there's Moshe Rabbeinu blowing, just as a sign that he wants to gather the people to share something with them. Sheyishmu v'yavoyu l'ma'amadim u'l'duchanam. It's like, wow, we're beginning the daily service. And therefore, logic says that v'lo dachu Shabbos. And that will be challenged in a moment. But let's come back to the Gemara. So that was a question, that's the answer. So Amar Rava, I completely reject what Rab Zeira is saying. Man ha-deloi chash lekimcha. That's his expression. Who is this one that is someone who doesn't check his flour before he sifts it to know whether it's a fine flour, whether it's a coarse flour? No, it's someone who makes a statement that is completely rejected, like you didn't even look into the question. That's what Rav is saying. Because how can you go ahead and say that on Shabbos you did not have the first 3 when B'chol Yoim Tanan? The Mishnah opened up yesterday that every day B'chol Yoim Hoyesham Esrim Ba'achas Tkez B'Mikdash. And the Mishnah says regarding the B'chol Yoim Shalosh L'Psichas Sha'arim. You're going to ask, but you can't sound trumpets. Again, there's a klal that Ein Shvus B'Mikdash. You could, even if it's only L'Siman Ba'alma, it's in the Beis HaMikdash. Number 1. V'oid, number 2, even if you're right, that when the Mishnah says every day the 21 and the Mishnah began to count the 3 to the opening of the gates, it was takanat on Shabbos. All you did is you explained why you don't have 51, but you're back to 48. Even if you're right, this should have been a better example for the Mishnah to give. Why? Litni, the Mishnah should have given this as the example, Shabbos, that's inside the Yom Tov of Sukkos, Hoyesham Arba V'Shmoina, because by making that statement, the Mishnah will be teaching us two novelties, two chidushim. The Shamat Mina Tarte, number one Shamat Mina, the Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, that is what? That the three soundings of the trumpets were not done on the 10th step, as we learned on Nun Aleph, but it was done regarding putting the Aravis around the Mizbeach. That's number one. And by the way, the Mishnah is telling us Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov even with our example. But then there would be number two. And Vishamat Minod Rabacha Barab Chanina, which until he came with the Braisa, no one knew it. If the Mishnah would have given this as an example, and the Mishnah would have written that Shabbos on Sukkot, there's 48, the only way to get there is taka by saying that there were 18 connected to Musaf. 9 for Shabbos, 9 for Sukkot. And that would have been something that the Rabbeinu HaKadosh should have used as an example, because you have a double chiddush. The example that he gives only has the one chiddush that we're following, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. So therefore, Ela Amar Rava, another din. Forget about it's equal. It's not equal. Guys, we learned this above. All of the 12 that's connected to the drawing of the water on Shabbos, water is not drawn. Well, that was really what bothered him. The whole kasha is not a kasha. So it's not that it's a wash. You have much less. Let's go with Rav Acha. Let's accept Rav Acha. So you have 21, and let's go here. Rava holds that you also had the first 3 of blowing of the gates. You have 9 and 9. So 21 and 18 is 39. Much less than 48, the Batzri Tuva, which is why the Mishnah could not have given that example, and Rav Acha stands. Rav Acha Bar Chanina stands. Okay, another question against Rav Acha. Frekti Gemara, 1 second, I have another case for Litni Nami. What's going to happen if and when Rosh Hashanah falls out on Shabbos? So let's go. The Ha'ike Tulasa Musafin on Rosh Hashanah. That falls out on Shabbos. You don't have 2 musafs, you have 3 musafs. Number 1, the musaf of Rosh Hashanah. And don't forget the word that Rav Acha says for every musaf 9. Number 2, the musaf of Rosh Chodesh. Number 3, the musaf of Rosh Hashanah. So let's go back. So you have the 21 that you do every day. Plus you have 27. 27 is 9 times 3, the 3 musafin. I get it that since it's Shabbos, take out all of the 12 connected to the Mayim ceremony. So what? 21 and 27 has to 48. So weiter, we have another scenario. It says the Gemara that the Mishnah Erev Shabbos Shebetoich HaChag Itzrich Alei. You're right. This would have been a good example. That would have been a good example. But being based on the premise that the Mishnah will only give one scenario where you have the 48, ours is better. Because la'ashme'inan kid Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Fakert, we just learned on Daf Nun Aleph Amud Beis that you blow the shofar on the 10th step. If you were to add it all up together, if you were to include that and the Aravis on the side of the Mizbeach, you would have 51. No, it's Rabbeinu HaKadosh picked an example to let you know that whether the 3 sounds were blown on the 10th step is a machloikas tanoim. So he dafka picked that, at least it has this one chiddush. Now all of this answer, that why is one better than the other, is predicated on us accepting that the Mishnah should only give one example. But that's not always the case. It is common for Rebbe to give more than one example in a Mishnah. So asks the Gemara, and the mile of giving the example of Rosh Hashanah that falls out on Shabbos is that you would also be letting us know the sheet of Rav Acha Bar Rab Chanina, that no one knew this Braisa. The only way you would get 48 is by saying that Musaf, Rosh Hashanah, forget about the Milah Hamayim. Rosh Hashanah that falls out on Shabbos, you have the 21 of every day and the 27 of 3 Musafin. So Frek the Gemara, 4 lines from the bottom. Atu, Miket, Amar, Litni Ha, Veloy Litni Ha. My question wasn't, why don't you substitute the one of our Mishnah, which is Erev Shabbos, which is Cholamoid Sukkos, to Rosh Hashanah that falls out on Shabbos. No. My question was, Litni Ha, Velitni Ha. And each one has a Chiddush. One is Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, who counts the 3 around the Mizbeach, doesn't count the blowing on the 10th step, and the Chiddush of saying Rosh Hashanah Shechaliyas B'Shabbos would be telling us, Chevre, every Musaf had its own 9 trumpet blasts. And the only answer, this is a very general piece of knowledge that we have to have, if there are only two examples of a certain din, then you are very right by asking, let Rabbeinu HaKadosh write both. The moment the Mishnah has more than two examples, then it makes total sense for the Mishnah only to give one. And you can't ask why one and not the other, because the Mishnah didn't only not write number 2, the Mishnah didn't write number 3. No, it's either you give the exhaustive list or you only give one example. Mima nafshach. So if there only would have been 2 cases, then your kasha is a kasha. The Gemara answers, Tana v'shiyed. Or people read a Tana v'shayed. In other words, it's even giving the 2 won't be exhaustive. Then you'll ask, why didn't Rebbe write all 3 or all 4 or all 5? Once there are many cases, you only give one. So we are acknowledging that yes, Rav Acha is right. Rosh Hashanah Shechaliyas b'Shabbos, there were 48 soundings. The case of our Mishnah is a Chavada, the case of 48 soundings. But there is another case that also has 48. So now the Gemara is going to try to figure out my shiur, the high shiur. What will be that third case which will justify? Anyways, you're not giving an exhaustive list, so we'll just give one example. Says the Gemara, the third case, the additional case is shiur erev Shabbat, erev Pesach. What's the case of erev Pesach? That in addition to the 21, you have 21 soundings that we do every day. You're going to have 27 soundings just connected with the Shchitas Korban Pesach. How do you have 27 soundings? Guys, we had this in Pesachim, that the Korban Pesach was brought in 3 shifts. Remember that? And every shift would say the Hallel 3 times. And connected to every Hallel recitation in the Azara, you had 3 soundings. Tekiah, Teruah, Tekiah. In other words, you have 3 groups. Every group blew the shofar 9 times. The 9 times was Hallel number 1, Hallel number 2, Hallel number 3. So 9 times 3 is 27. So weiter. So you have the 21 of every day. You have the 27 connected to the bringing of the Korban Pesach. So that's another example. So you already have 3 examples. So here you can't ask anymore. Rabbeinu HaKadosh is not going to write them all. Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis challenges the Gemara. That's not a good answer. I reject that answer. The Mishnah gives the case of Erev Shabbos on Chalamoid Sukkos. That's a case. The Mishnah gives it. We are asking, why don't you write Shabbos on Rosh Hashanah? Shabbos Rosh Hashanah has 48. Your answer, you're telling me that there is another case. That other case is not Lav Dafka true. Because Rabbi Yehuda, we know from Pesachim, Dafka holds that there wasn't 27 soundings of the trumpet connected to the Korban Pesach. Im Yishum Erev Pesach, Lav Shiuruhu. Why? Because maybe our Mishnah follows Rabbi Yehuda. It's possible. And the Shittas Rabbi Yehuda in Pesachim that says that since most people wanted to get in the earlier shifts, there were very few people left that brought the Korban Pesach in the 3rd and final shift, and because of there being so few people there, they never said the Hallel more than once until everyone brought their Korban Pesach. The Amar Miyemeyem Shalkat Shlishis, it never happened that the 3rd group got even to Ahavti Ki Yishma Hashem of the first time they said Hallel. Mipnei Shahoyu Imamu Atim. So Bekitzer, if you're saying that for every Hallel, right? For every Hallel, you have another set of 3 for this group. So take off the 48, 2 sets of 3. Take off 6, because they only said Hallel once. So Erev Pesach is only 42, according to Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, the only 2 cases of 48 is the case of our Mishnah and Shabbos Rosh Hashanah. So we're back to the question, right? Counters the Gemara, no, that we just established that our Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda. There is a 3rd case. You're telling me that our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda? Our Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda. You know how I know that? Because our Mishnah says there were 48 soundings. How does Rabbi Yehuda word? Rabbi Yehuda says there was never more than 16 sets. It's all the same number at the end, but our Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda. That was the beginning of the Gemara on Daf Nun Gimel Amud Beis. So it's good. So there is a 3rd case. The Gemara says, no, I don't accept that. Because maybe our Mishnah is not Rabbi Yehuda, but maybe he will subscribe to the historical fact that Rabbi Yehuda speaks about. that Erev Pesach, they never sounded the trumpets 27 times because the third group never had enough time to repeat the Hallel more than once. They never even got through the part of the first Hallel. So we're back to the Kasha. So you have to find a third case where the trumpets were sounded 48 times to explain, to justify our Mishnah only giving one case. It's not an exhaustive list. Don't ask, write case number 2 because there's case number 3. Ein lo davar soif. Ela ma shiur dahai shiur. So here we will succeed in finding another case, l'kula alma, and that is shiur erev Pesach, that falls out on Erev Shabbos. What did we learn yesterday? Going back to Shabbos Daf Lamed Hey, let's go with Rabbi Yehuda. That they didn't sound the trumpets 27 times with the Koren Pesach. Take off 6. Because the last group did not say the second nor the third Hallel. Therefore, there was no trumpets with the second nor with the third. But on every Erev Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash, they would sound 6 sounds, like we learned. No, the Tkiya was to tell the people in the fields to stop working. Number 2 is the storekeepers in Yerushalayim to stop working. The third was to tell people that it's Lich Benshin. And then another Tarat when Shabbos came in. So you do have 48. So now we have 3 cases of 48. So now it makes sense for the Mishnah only to mention 1. In the Vailer of Acha Bar Chanina is standing strong. Now the Gemara here, Daf Nun Daled Amud Beis, quotes the Mishnah's statement, "Ve'ein moisifin al memches." You don't have a scenario where you have more than 48. Or wording it in the words of the Tana Rabbi Yehuda, you don't have a scenario where there are more than 16 sets. That's the max. Fragt die Gemara, "V'loi?" Yes, you do. V'ha'ikem erev Pesach, that falls on Shabbos. And how many are you going to have if you're going to follow Rabbi Yehuda that says that the final 6 soundings connected to Korban Pesach, deduct. Evenly with that, you're going to have 51 soundings. How do you come to 51? Chavra, look inside the Rashi. It's more or less in the middle of the narrow Rashis, around 30 lines from the top of the Amid. There were 51. How? So let's go back. 21. Chaf Aleph shebechol yom. Tisha de Musafim. Tisha de Musafim, because it's Shabbos. So there's only one Musaf. Fine. So 21 and 9, you're up to 30. Now let's go with Rabbi Yehuda. Either Ushmaina Esrei, the Shtei Kitois, the 18 from the first 2 groups, because every group had a total of 9. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, there was 1 additional 3, there was 1 more set with Shlishis, the Kat Shlishis, that's 51. And according to the Chachamim, that there was noch another 6. So you have 51 and 6 is 57. Oy Gewalt, that's a kashem. So now the Gemara gives us our answer. You're right. When the Mishnah says that ve'loi ve'ein moisifen al memches, it doesn't mean that there wasn't an exception. What justifies a case being an exception that we're not reckoning with something that doesn't happen every year? Says the Gemara that ki ktana midi ve'ein moisifen al memches. This klal is only ki ktani kama midi de'isei b'chol shana. If there is something that happens every year. However, Erev Pesach, to fall out on Shabbos, is not something that happens every year. And therefore, like Tani, and as the Rishonim point out, like I did the Asas Lahacha, now that the Gemara made that statement, what was the kasha that we had on Amud Aleph? Why didn't the Mishnah give the case of Rosh Hashanah Shechaliyas b'Shabbos? Now you have your answer. The Mishnah is not reckoning cases that don't happen every year. What does the Mishnah give? What is the example of the Mishnah? That when Erev Shabbos is on Sukah. Now people are going to say, Erev Shabbos as on Sukah, Chalamoid Sukkos happens every year because Sukkot is 7 days. So it's got to be every year, one of the days of Sukkot and Erev Shabbos. Now the Gemara has a Gavaldik Kasha. Yes, but no. If you're telling me that the Mishnah is not going to reckon something that doesn't happen every year, frek the Gemara, Otu, Erev Shabbos, Shebetoich HaChag, Mi Ise B'chol Shana. Now, you're going to say it has to be, because guys, Sukkot is a 7-day holiday. But what we have to bring back is the following. Do you remember the Mishnah? The Mishnah says that they would start to prepare for the Simchas Beis HaShe'eva Motzoi Yom Tov Rishon. And that's the big discussion, whether there was 0 celebrations on the first day of Yom Tiv. And we're going to go, the Rebbe spoke about this often, with the many Rishonim that say that yes, there were celebrations even on the first day of Yom Tiv, but it wasn't on the same level. They didn't prepare the platforms, including they did not sound the trumpets connected with the gathering of the water. That will be, for example, the second Tosfos in this Amud. Even if there was a celebration, when Sukkah falls out, when the first day of Sukkah falls out on Erev Shabbos, you're not going to have 48. That's dafka the words. No, there is one scenario. There will be a time that Sukkot, you'll go through a whole Yom Tov of Sukkot, and you'll never have the 48. But Sukkot is 7 days. One day is on Friday, yeah, but if that's the first day, then the whole thing is off. The Hechidamin, Yom Tov Rishon, Be'erev Shabbos. Yom Tov Rishon, Shechal is Be'erev Shabbos, you will not have any of the 12 that are connected with the She'ivas Hamayim. Or let me go better, even if you're going to go like Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, so the total is connected to the Aravos, so even if they would do the Arava, even if they would do the Arava in the Beis HaMikdash, prior to all of the Gezeres, you would not have 9, you wouldn't have 48. You wouldn't have any soundings connected to She'ivas Hamayim. That's a Gevaldik Akash. Now, of course, Chevre, that there's much less chance that the first day of Sukkot falls on Erev Shabbos. Ruba, right? It will fall on another day. So what? But there is a scenario. It's not every single year. And the answer that the Gemara gives is great. That the first day of Sukkot will never fall on Erev Shabbos, ever. How can it never fall on Erev Shabbos? Because let's go backwards, guys. Let's understand the calendar. How many days do you have in between Yom Kippur and Sukkot? We know there are 4 days in between, right? Yud Kei Vav Kei. If Erev Sukkot if the first day of Sukkot falls on Erev Shabbos, what does that mean? What day would have Yom Kippur been? If you have 4 days in between, then Yom Kippur is on Sunday. Right? So you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, in between, then you have Sukkot. Based in Sanhedrin never allowed for Yom Kippur to fall out on Sunday. What do you mean they never allowed it to fall out? Simply that if Elul, even if the moon was seen, they would delay Rosh Chodesh for a day. They would change the real length of the month of Elul to guarantee that Yom Kippur doesn't fall out on Sunday. If Yom Kippur does not fall out on Sunday, which it does not, the way Hillel the Miner established the calendar, Erev Shabbos will never be the first day of Sukkot. Beautiful. So the example the Mishnah gives happens every single year. And for the Gemara, that ki maklinon Yom Tov Rishon be'erev Shabbos, whenever Sanhedrin is seeing that if they're going to establish Rosh Hashanah the way the moon really appeared, it's going to chap that the first day of Sukkot is going to fall on Erev Shabbos. And by the way, the first day of Sukkot on Erev Shabbos also means that Rosh Hashanah is on Erev Shabbos. You know, the days of Rosh Hashanah, we all know that, are the same days of the week of Sukkot, are the same days of the week Chutz La'aretz for the final 2 days. So Beis Din will purposefully, and they have that right, is Matchi Dachinale, they would postpone it. Elul wouldn't have 29 days, they would add another day to Elul, because we don't want for Yom Kippur to fall out on Sunday. And my Tama, because given the Yom Tov Rishon Shel Chag, Yom Tov Shabbos, if we're going to allow things to be the way they really are, if we're going to allow Rosh Hashanah to be on Erev Shabbos, first day, which means the first day of Sukkot will be on Erev Shabbos, which means, let's go backwards now, how many days prior to the first day of Sukkot? If that's on Friday, put 4 days in between, and the day prior is Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, Amos Hava, it's going to chap out, Bechad B'Shabbos, the previous Sunday. We don't allow that to happen. Hilkach dachin olei. And like Rashi brings over here, what's the issue? So there are 2 issues. I'm just reading inside the end of the narrow lines, and we're going to learn this soon in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah. V'chayshinen mishum yerkaya, vegetables. You're not allowed to pick vegetables on Shabbos. You can't pick vegetables on Yom Kippur. People are going to want to break their fast with light food. They're going to want to eat vegetables. So when are you going to have to pick those vegetables for it to be ready right after the end of the fast? Erev Shabbos, too many hours will go by. 48 hours without refrigeration, they're going to wilt. They won't be good. And Mishum Messiah, we cannot bury on Shabbos. We may not bury the dead on Yom Kippur. Someone is going to pass away in the beginning of Shabbos, you're going to wait more than 48 hours to bury the person. Again, there was no freezers then. You don't allow such a thing to happen. And now the Gemara wants to let us know that this statement, that the Sanhedrin would always make sure that the first day of Sukah is never on Friday, which also means that the first day of Rosh Hashanah is never on Friday. We actually today, when Hillel the Minor made the calendar, we say Loi Adu Rosh. That's one of the Simonim. That Rosh Hashanah will never fall out until the coming of Mashiach. Not on Sunday, not on Wednesday, and not on Friday. And the reason why Rosh Hashanah may not fall out on Friday is because if Rosh Hashanah will be on Friday, then Sukkot will be on Friday, which means Yom Kippur is going to be on Sunday, and that's the issue over here. And parenthetically, how ironic is it? Rosh Hashanah is the marking of the creation of Adam Arishan. What day of the week was Adam Arishan created? Adam and Chava on Friday. It's amazing. Yet, lo yadu rosh. But the Gemara wants you to know, does everyone subscribe to that? And we'll see, no, it's a machlokes tanoim. Not everyone agrees that we are so cautious not to allow the first day of, not to allow Yom Kippur on Sunday. Now, we're not even talking about Hillel the Minor's calendar. We're speaking about in the times of the Tanoim, when they had a Sanhedrin. Still, we just learned that they never allowed it to happen. Who said that? No, it's not true. And now we're going to start quoting a Mishnah, we're going to quote a Braisa that clearly is speaking about a scenario where Yom Kippur falls out on Sunday. So we're back to our question, because if that will be the case, our Mishnah's example is also not something that happens every year. Let's go with the Mishnah and Shabbos. What the Mishnah and Shabbos is speaking about, the Machlekes Rabbi Shmuel and Rabbi Akiva, when you bring a carbon, so even though it's ideal to burn the fats of the carbon on that same day, but the fats may be burned also the night post. Hekter, chalavim, ve'evarim can go on the night post. Now here's the question. You brought a carbon on Friday. Shabbos, you can't burn things. You are only allowed to do it if the carbon is doicha Shabbos, so all of the steps that have to be done are doicha Shabbos. Are you allowed to burn the fats of a carbon that was slaughtered in the Beis HaMikdash on Friday? Can you burn it Friday night? Says the Mishnah that chel veisha. So 1 second. So the answer is no. Of course not. Now let's go to a case where you have Yom Kippur juxtaposed to Shabbos. Either Yom Kippur on Friday or Yom Kippur on Sunday. And we're going to focus on the Yom Kippur on Sunday. Why might that not be problematic? So Rabbi Yishmael has the following approach. Since Shabbos is considered a day even holier than Yom Kippur, so if the carbon is from a day of greater Kedusha, and yet the Torah allows you to burn the fats on that day, you are allowed to burn the fats of that carbon on Yom Kippur, but not vice versa. So Rabbi Yishmael holds that if Yom Kippur falls out on Friday, so you want to burn the fats of Yom Kippur on Shabbos, Rabbi Yishmael says, Zoi Sloi. Shabbos is considered a day of even greater Kiddush. But if you have Shabbos going into Sunday Yom Kippur, that's the case of the Mishnah, Chelvei Shabbos are allowed to be offered on Yom Kippur. Matzah Shabbos, which is Yom Kippur. Now, just to know that Rabbi Akiva disagrees with that. Rabbi Akiva holds that they have equal sanctity, and therefore it may not be burnt. Okay. And V'amar Rab Zeira, regarding this Mishnah, that Ki Avinan Bei Rav, when I was in the yeshiva of Rav in Bavel, Havi Amrei Hadatanya, he would bring the following Braisa, Yom Kippur Shechal Liyos Be'erev Shabbos. Here again, the Braisa is speaking about either Yom Kippur on Friday or Yom Kippur on Sunday, as we'll see in a moment. Loi Hoyotoikin, as we just spoke out, that every Erev Shabbos in the Beis HaMikdash there were 6 soundings, Tkiya, Trua Tkiya, and again Tkiya, Trua Tkiya, to let people know that what? That the time of Isur Melacha is beginning. But if Yom Kippur is Friday, anyways people are not working, there's no point in sounding the trumpets. And likewise, Uba Motzoi Shabbos, Loi Hoya Mavdilin, we're speaking about Pashat making Havdalah ala Kois. You would say, what's even the Havamina? No one is allowed to drink on Yom Kippur. Maybe you would make Havdalah on a kois and a minor would drink it. Says the Braisa, you don't do that. And not only that, Divrei HaKoili. This Braisa goes according to everyone, Bein l'Rabbi Yishmael and Bein l'Rabbi Akiva. That is how he learned it when he was in the yeshiva of Rav. However, says Rab Zera that Kis Alikas Lo Hassan, when I came to Eretz Yisrael, Ashkachte, I found to the Tana Rabbi Yehuda Bereid Rab Shimon ben Pazi, to Yosef Ika Amar, I want you to know that this Braisa only follows Rabbi Akiva that considers Shabbos and Yom Kippur of the same Kedusha. And listen to the Chap. He says, they said in Eretz Yisrael that Rabbi Yehuda Bereid Rab Shimon ben Pazi, that according to Rabbi Yishmael, when it's Yom Kippur, Erev Shabbos, Yom Kippur on Friday, and you're going into Shabbos, sound the shofar. Sound the shofar. Why? Anyways, you're not allowed to work. No, sound the shofar according to Rabbi Yishmael, because since Rabbi Yishmael holds that Shabbos has a greater amount of Kedusha, so you'll say, we're sounding the shofar because now it was only Asr b'Malacha Mitzad Yom Kippur, and now it's on Shabbos. And people should always remember, Rabbi Yishmael, that Shabbos has a greater amount of Kedusha. And why is that? Because in the case where Yom Kippur is going to fall on Sunday, and you're going to have a carbon that was geshachten on Shabbos, you should know that the chalavim are allowed to be burnt on Motzei Shabbos. As we just learned above, that Chelvei Shabbos Kerevim b'Yom Kippur according to Rabbi Yishmael. Bottom line is that there's a Mishnah and there's a Braisa that's speaking about dinim for the case where Yom Kippur falls out on Sunday. If Yom Kippur can fall out on Sunday, then we're back to our problem. So then Friday could be the first day of Sukkot. And then the Mishnah's example of where they only blew 48 and not more is not every single year. Says the Gemara that this is a machloikas tanoim, like Hashem. Ha Rabbanan, our Mishnah follows the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan hold that even in the times of Sanhedrin, Yom Kippur never fell out on Sunday. If they needed to, they would delay Elul. Ha meaning the Mishnah and Shabbos. Ha means the Braisa that we just quoted, that's speaking about halachas regarding the case where Yom Kippur is on Sunday, follows the Tana that's called Achedim Hi. Achedim is the one that holds that they would never play around with the length of the month of Elul, even if it were to mean that Yom Kippur falls out on Sunday. And where do we see that so holds Achedim? The Tanya. Achedim Oimrim. Now Achedim is not addressing Yom Kippur. Achedim is giving you a fact that if you want to know what day of the week will Rosh Hashanah be, what day of the week will Shavuos be, if you know what day of the week it is this year, you will automatically know when it's going to be next year, according to Achedim. Achedim holds that this lunar calendar, which has to be made properly, you can't play around and just add another day to a month. A lunar calendar will have 12 months. Every month is comprised of 29 and a half days and a bit, which means that a lunar year will have 354 days. Now, if you're going to take 354 divided by 7, you're only going to have a surplus of 4 days to come to the 354. So he makes a statement that is always that Ein bein atzeres latzeres, meaning what day of the week is Shavuos. If you know when it was, if it was Sunday on one year, add 4 days and you'll know what weekday it's going to be in the next year. And similarly, ve'ein bein Rosh Hashanah Rosh Hashanah el arba yomim bilvad, because you are faithful in making sure that 1 month has 30 days and 1 month has 29 days, and you can't play around with that. And you clearly, in other words, if we, for these reasons of we don't want, because of the vegetables, because of the burying of the dead, we want to make Elul we want to add a day to Elul, then there'll be a year, even not a leap year, a normal year that will have 355 days. If there is a metzias of a year that has 355 days, then Achedim's statement is wrong. Then sometimes there's going to be a 5 weekday difference. He doesn't subscribe to that. And then Achedim adds, similarly, that whenever we make a leap year, Achedim hold that the extra other only has 29 days. So in our context, so 28 days is 7 times divided is 7. So you only have one additional day. 29 is 1 day more. So, and if the Shana Me'oberes, then there's always going to be 5 weekdays separating 1 year and the other. So here we see that Achedim does not subscribe to playing around with the month of Elul, and our Mishnah follows the Chachamim. And now, Chevra, we're still going back to Rav Acha Bar Chanina. All of that began with Rav Acha coming with Anaya Braisa. That you should know that every time Musaf is blown, there was another 9 sounds, another 3 sets. And that means that even if you have one day that had various Musafin, well, 2 Musafin, there were 18 sounds. If there were 3 Musafin, there were 27 sounds. For every Musaf, you have another 9 soundings. Frek the Gemara an Rav Acha, it says in a Braisa, Rosh Chodesh, that falls out on Shabbos. So it says in the Braisa, Shir shel Rosh Chodesh, Doicha Shir shel Shabbos. What kapitel Tehillim? What were the lyrics of the songs of the Levium? So you have to pick. You would pick the one of Rosh Chodesh. And now you can ask why. Why isn't Shabbos? Shabbos is more Tadr. 1 second. When did we sound the trumpets? During the melody that was sung. If Rav Acha is saying that every time there was another Musaf, there was another soundings, it must be that there was another song. This Braisa seems to imply that they only would sing one shir. The question is, which one? Ve'im Isa. The Braisa should say, this Shabbos, v'lema de Rosh Chodesh. You have to say both. So Amar Rab Safra, I'll tell you pshat in this Braisa. You know what doicha means? Doicha doesn't mean that you picked one song. Doicha means, doicha lekadem. Doicha lekadem means that you would sing both. The question is, which ones takes precedence? So the Braisa is telling you that the shir of Rosh Chodesh comes first. So Rav Acha is standing. And now we quoted the Braisa. The question is why. Normally the rule is when you have to organize one that goes first, one that goes second, the rule of more frequent takes precedence, seemingly would have told you otherwise. The Levium should first sing the song of Shabbos and then sing the song of Rosh Chodesh. So Amar Rabbi Yechanan, yeah, but there's a counter value which trumps. And what is that? We didn't know when Rosh Chodesh is. Anything that you can do that can make a greater notification, a greater hekir, that today is Rosh Chodesh, do that first. So that's why here they would sing the melody of Rosh Chodesh first. Why do we even need this? That don't we learned this in Shkolim? That what happens, says the Mishnah in Shkolim, that when they would bring up all of the fats of the carbon to be burnt on the altar, remember they would bring it up and then they would take a pause and they would go daven. So where would they place it on the ramp? So the Mishnah says, were always put down on the lower half of the ramp. And dafka, which side? On the eastern side. Now there was a difference in girsas, you can see on the side, but let's read the way it's over here. When it is b'mizrach, when it's musaf, so you would have side the fats of the Talmud and of musaf, well shomosafim. Whenever they would place it down on the ramp to go davin, they would place it down on the lower half of the ramp. The ramp had a total of 32 amas, but we're on the western side. Or change the versions. And then the Mishnah says that v'shal Rosh Chodesh, it was put below the karkov. Now, what the karkov means, we learned in Shkolim, the karkov is the ledge. The ledge is already 6 amas off the ground. In other words, right underneath the place of the ledge still means it's above, it's higher up on the ramp. They would place the parts of the carbon that are to be burnt during that pause on a much higher part of the ramp. And why did they place it that much higher? Daf nun hey. So we learned over there. Why? Because they made a heker. Oh, every day the karbanos, the chalavim, the ivarim were put on the lower half. On Rosh Chodesh they put it on the higher half. So we already had that siman. So why would they go? So why not go back to the Tadr v'she'ein Tadr and sing the shir of Shabbos first? Says the Gemara as was that today Heked Avdinon. They made two Hekedim. The Chazi Hai Chazi and V'Chazi B'Hai Chazi. It's that important for people to know that it's Rosh Chodesh. The parts of the animal were put on a higher part. The shir came first. Bottom line is that whenever another musaf was brought, they had a accompaniment of the Levium for that musaf, together with a total of an additional 9 soundings. And Rav Acha is standing and will continue, God willing, tomorrow.